Hey, she's that same girl. That is just who I am.
And that girl had a vision for Uncle Nearest whiskey. Can you take us back for folks who are watching who may not have read Chloe's story on you last year or who had seen you at our Power Women Summit? Take us back. What was the inspiration behind building this brand?
When you look at the bourbon industry, and I was a bourbon drinker before I came into this industry. When you look at the bourbon industry overall, we've had bourbon for 400 years, essentially, officially for a couple of hundred years. But there had never been, prior to Uncle Nearest hitting the shelves, prior to Nearest Green Tennessee Whiskey, there had never been a bourbon brand that honored anyone or commemorated anyone or talked about anyone that wasn't a white male. I think Johnny Walker tried to do it with Jane Walker, so I was super disappointed when I learned they made her up. And so you have an entire industry, one of America's most foremost industries around the world. And we know that because every single time tariffs, there are retaliatory tariffs, the two industries that get hit first, agriculture, bourbon, every single time, because around the world, bourbon is seen as apple pie, as American as apple pie. And so we know how important that industry is. And yet our country is 70% women and people of color. And there was never a bottle that spoke to anyone in that 70%. And so my love for bourbon wasn't impacted by that because I didn't know it until I came into the industry and started looking and saying, hey, wait a minute. But what drew me to the industry wasn't the bourbon itself. What drew me to the industry was the story of Nearest Green, the first known African-American master distiller, the teacher of Jack Daniel, the only known master distiller for Jack Daniel Distillery No. 7. And this story was lost to time in 1978. So the entire time Jack Daniel was alive, his descendants were alive and running the distillery, whether as president of the distillery or the head of the board, the entire time until 1978. The story of Nearest Green, his significance, his legacy in that company that is known around the world, it was always a part of the story. It was always a part of the official history. So much so that Nearest's descendants, when they were in college, they would bring friends back to the distillery for a tour so that their friends could hear about their ancestor. Like there was so much pride from the Green family. And then the story disappeared in 78. So from 78 until the time that the story reemerged because of that photo in 2016, that story was gone. And if it weren't for the fact that Jack Daniel took a photo with, the only known photo that we have of him taking a picture with anyone other than himself. So the only known photo of Jack with other people, he decides to cede the center position of the entire photograph to an African-American man. This is taken circa 1904. And if you did something like that, I could just imagine the photographer behind the camera going, I'm sorry, there's a black man, there's a Negro in the center of this photo. Do y'all realize there's a Negro in the center of this photo? The photo was meant to be about Jack, about his business, about his legacy. And he chose to put an African-American man, Nearest Green's son, George Green, to the right of him, and then he stepped off center. That's, to me, he was trying to say something. He was trying to do something. And I wanted to know what was that statement he was making. And as I dove into it, it was very clear that the statement that he was making was, this is my mentor. This is my friend. This is that person where there would be no Jack Daniel Distillery known around the world if it wasn't for Nearest Green making this whiskey and then his sons continuing in his footsteps. This would not be what it is. And so he also had the foresight to know at some point someone would try to erase the story, but they wouldn't be able to because they'd have to deal with that photo.